Welcome to the CQC video training series. This is a spot topic video on the attribute editor. The CQC user interface editor is fairly similar to what you might see in various other UI editing tools that you've seen before. For the most part, what you do is you drop user interface elements onto a background. We call those elements widgets, and that's a fairly common term for such things. And then you can modify the attributes of those widgets, which control their either visual or their interactive characteristics. So the visual attributes are those that control how it looks, and the interactive attributes are those that control how it reacts when the user interacts with it. So let's look at some here. When you select a widget in the editor, you will see the selection marks around it. And when you select one, you will see that the attribute editor over to the right here fills in. And as is common, there is a set of names on one side and a set of values on the other. And there's also a third column here, which we'll look at more in a minute. So basically, the attributes are these named values that you can modify in order to control the appearance or the action of a particular widget. So let's look at some basic attribute editing. Let's first put a new widget on here. I'm just going to throw actually let me do that further over so that you have some hope of seeing what I'm doing here. I will do a new button, and it'll be a command button. I don't think you could see any of that, sorry. And we'll look at this one as a sample here. So we've selected it, and we have the selection handles, and that means that the attribute editor is showing the attributes for that widget. And so let's just go through and look at some of the simple values, where simple means that it's something that you can directly represent here in this right-hand column. All of the widgets have a widget ID. It's optional, but it is required if you want to send a command to the widget. Buttons are more likely to send commands than be sent them, but you can always set them for your own identification purposes anyway. And so this being just a text value, you can either just click it and edit it in place, or if you want to, you can select this little ellipsis over here to the side, and that will get you an interactive editor. So we can just enter the text here, and sometimes that's more convenient if the actual editing area is small, which often it will be because you will minimize this in order to have maximum editing area. Another option is an area, and areas are composed of a point, origin, and a size. And normally you can edit areas in two different ways. You can either go over to the actual editor window and you can drag things around and you can drag their size, or you can use the arrow keys to move it around, and you can hold the control key down and use the arrow keys to control its size. But if you happen to be over here in the attribute editor, you might want to do it here. And you can do the same sorts of things. If you just use the arrow keys, then you just will move up and down. And if you use the left and right, nothing will happen because the attribute editor normally does not respond to that. But if you hold down the Alt key and use the arrows, then you are adjusting the origin of the widget. And if you hold down the control key, just as you did over on the editing side, you are controlling the size of the widget. So you can, without leaving the attribute editor, you can modify the area. And of course, you can also just type in a value. And this is often very convenient if you just want to get it to a very specific pixel location, for instance, or a specific size. Just hit escape to back out if you don't want to make changes. Another very basic type of attribute is what we would call an enumerated value. It's one that has just a small set of fixed values. And those can either be edited by just typing them in the same sort of way. So select it and then click. In this particular one, it's not very convenient to type this in because it's not something that would be easy to remember. But you could do it if you do happen to remember what the values are. You can also just use the left and right keys to flip between them. This is not going to actually do anything for the button because it's covered by an image. So let me select the template itself, and we'll try that again here. So we can just step through them with the left and right keys, or as before, we can select over here. And in this case, because it is a small set of values, it doesn't pop up an interactive editor. It just drops down a menu and lets you select them that way. Another common scenario is a true or false value. So there are a number of ways to edit these. You can just type it in, or you can type 1 or 0 as well, will work for true or false. You can use left or right keys, and you can use the drop down menu. So plenty of ways to edit that, whatever you feel most comfortable with. So let's actually create another type of widget here to look at some other attributes. I'll create just, let's say, a area fill or something like that. So let's look at this one here, which is rounding. This particular one is a number, which means that we can either just type it in, so select it and then click, and then you can just type in a number, and you can see that the area has been rounded off here. Or you can just use the left and right arrows to run it up or down. And just to demonstrate here as well, if you were to enter something invalid, say that, which is not a number, you will get a little pop-up that tells you what is wrong so that you can fix it. Just hit escape to get rid of that. And then we can also just hit escape to cancel out of editing a value as well. And let's see, we have now some colors here. And those you can either just type them in. So if we wanted to modify just one aspect of that color, we could do it just by typing it in, and they're just 3 comma separated values from 0 to 255. Or you can interactively edit it by clicking the ellipsis to the side. Ellipsis always means that it's going to pop up a dialog, and you can just edit it indirectly that way. And the rest of these are also just colors. So let's see if we can find some more. I think that's all of the examples of simple values. Or actually, here's another one here. This is an effect offset, and we don't have anything that would make good use of that here. Let me create a new one here. I'll just create a static text value. And this one actually has a simple drop shadow. I'm going to get rid of that. Just highlight it, left arrow, it goes to false. And I'll increase the font size. That's a number, so just right arrow to increase it. And I'm going to change the text color to this black. Or actually, I'll make it kind of white. I think that might suit our demonstration better here. And I'm going to set an effect on it. And here again, this has a drop-down V indicator, which means it's just a simple drop-down selection. So I'm going to set that to drop shadow. And it's created a drop shadow here, although we can't really see it very well because the colors are very similar. So I'm going to change the shadow color to purely black. And now what we want to do is offset that effect. And this one would just be the same as a point, just like we affected the point origin of an area before. This is also a point effectively. So if we hold down the Alt key, we can move that shadow around and create a nice drop shadow like that. And I believe that is it in terms of simple values. An awful lot of what you do will just be modifying those. And of course, you can really just use the arrow keys and make modifications almost exclusively like that without ever leaving the attribute editor for the most part. And if you are the kind of user who prefers that, you can avoid picking up the mouse quite a bit during any of this editing process. So next we will look at some more complex types of attributes. There are certain types of attributes that are just too complex to edit directly or even to display or meaningfully in the attribute area here. So these are edited usually through a pop-up dialog. So let's select the button here, and it will have some that we can demonstrate. For instance, the action that the button takes when it's clicked. And this one, if you click it here, it will not let you edit anything in place because there's just not any practical way to edit it like that. So any of these that have an ellipse beside them, these are the ones that are going to pop up a dialog in order to edit a complex attribute. So in this case, it brings up our action editor, which there will be separate videos on. But this is how you would actually configure this button to do some command. And let's say for images, this particular button allows for pressed and unpressed images and so forth. So the images one, again, we click on it here, it doesn't let us do anything. So we click the ellipse and we get a button that will allow us to edit the images that this particular button uses. And there are others here like an attribute and translation table as well, which again is just another dialog box. And the template itself has some as well, and the reason these are complex is because they are a list of things. So in this case, for instance, the template allows you to configure a set of hotkey actions or hotkey driven actions. And although each one of them is only an action, there's a list of them, so there's no way that they could be edited here directly in place. So you get a dialog that you can modify those particular hotkeys and then save them away. And as with most things, these are resizable. So that's it. Basically, there are simple attributes that you edit in place, and there are complex attributes that you edit through a pop-up, and there are visual attributes that modify the visual aspect of the widget, and then there are interactive attributes that control how the widget reacts when you interact with it. And that's the basic gist of attributes and attribute editing.